asked Srivida Prabhu in the doorway on the way in what I should speak today. And he said, whatever you like. And I said, what do you like? And he didn't say anything. How do you know? And when I was given all these flowers, I prayed to Prabhupada, give me some sign, and then all these flowers came. So I think I should say something about flowers. Everything in nature is God's way of teaching us essential messages to realize the purpose of life and how to achieve it. If we are receptive, we can receive it. Our beloved Gurudev, Srila Prabhupada, he would sometimes say that we should not see with our eyes, but we should see with our ears. Which means when we gain knowledge, then that knowledge can be confirmed and it can be enhanced and realized through what we see with our eyes. So many times we see flowers. Now I'm seeing so many flowers. It's very interesting because life is like this. And I get so many flowers and I'm allergic to flowers. So if anyone thinks I'm enjoying getting these flowers, and really I'm very humbled by the love that people offer me because I don't deserve it. But the flowers themselves, if I wasn't allergic to them, I would not love them near as much as I do. Because they're like my gurus. They teach me so many good lessons. A flower has become so beautiful, so soft, so fragrant, and so worthy of being offered to the Supreme Lord. Because the flower has grown in the face of difficulties. I remember when I was about 9 years old, my father was a businessman in Chicago. He and his brother invested everything that they had, and they didn't have much, in a particular business venture. And one of the biggest corporations in all of America was promoting this as being what was going to take off and create great prosperity for the whole country. And they gave my father and uncle an opportunity to be one of the first investors. It was the Ford Motor Company. And the investment was in a whole new model of cars with about 20 different varieties. It was called the Edsel. And they thought this would be the crown jewel of the Ford Motor Company. My father, who didn't have much, he went into such immense debt, knowing for sure that he was going to make a lot of money. And he sold them. He was the largest dealer in Chicago. and they weren't selling. Nobody wanted to buy them. And then the Ford company, they said, well, we just need some incentive. So every dealer buy a pony, and we'll raffle the pony to get and give children the ride, and then the people will come and give their children rides, and they'll look at the cars, and then they'll buy them. So we bought a pony. And people came and they were going all day to give children rides, but the pony got so sick that every time a child would sit on it, it would collapse. And this was in 1958. He was spending almost $100 a day giving injections to the pony. And in the end, they did the raffle, because everybody put their names in. And there was about several hundred names, and he called every single person, and every person said the same thing. What am I going to do with a pony? I live in Chicago. So my father had to pay hundreds of more dollars to get this pony shipped to some farm just to give it away. And nobody bought any cars. And he went totally bankrupt. He was struggling just to keep the house. He had nothing. He was in such immense debt. Everything was ruined, finished. But I remember every morning when he was in the shower, because he would take a shower every morning. He would always sing in the shower. And my bedroom was right next to the shower. And I used to hear him singing, and he'd sing loud. And this song he was singing, it wasn't just a song. He was really taking shelter of the words of this song. Would you like to hear it?
Yeah. Will you sing it?
If everyone turns off the tape recorders and videos, I'll say When April showers, they come your way. They bring the flowers that bloom in May. Like that. Sorry about that. People don't like when it rains. It's very inconvenient, messy, muddy. Well, without rain, there's no food, there's no flowers. I live in Bombay, where they have monsoons. In fact, they're going on right as we're talking. And it's really inconvenient. Massive clouds. And sometimes the rain is so powerful that it floods the entire city. The railways are closed. The buses and the cars are closed because the streets are like rivers. It's kind of like a really dirty Venice. Airplanes can't work. Nobody likes it. But all the rain comes in those 4 months. And if there's not enough rain for the next 8 months, it's drought. The food skyrockets. There's no water. The government has to ration the water and only turn it on a few minutes a day. So the inconvenience is a blessing. If we just see it for what it is, we think this is terrible. But if we really look into the potential, into the future of what it can do for us, then we're happy when it rains. It's a blessing. We gratefully tolerate the inconvenience. And that really is what life is. That is wisdom. the wisdom of a flower. But a little seed is in dirt, mud, takes a lot of rain, and from it the little seed becomes a beautiful flower. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, in his teachings to Rupa Goswami, he explained that spiritual life, there must be some really good blessing from that noise. By the mercy of the Guru, or the great souls, the seed of devotion is planted within the heart. And it's like a creeper, a flower. Through the water of hearing and chanting and the glories of the Lord, associating with holy people, through our spiritual practices, the seed grows into the beautiful flower, which ultimately blossoms into prema, or love of God. But generally, Queen Kunti explains that unless the difficulties and hardships come in our life, very rarely does anyone really take their spiritual life seriously. It's a formality. It's kind of ritualistic. It makes us feel good. But to feel the urgency, the hardships are blessings. And it's not that we have to ask for hardships, because they come, whether we want them or not. Whether we're atheists or theists, or whatever religious order we may come from. The nature of this world is dukkhalaya mashashvatam. Hardships come. And today in this modern world, especially in the West, and more in the East, one of the greatest challenges is stress. Is this a concern for anyone here? You all look really mellow and sweet. I don't know if this is applicable to you, but it's applicable to most people. Such stress in the workplace, in the school, among relationships, with the environment. How to deal with it? I often tell a story of how one day I was sitting on the sandy bank of the Ganges River. I was sitting on, looking up at the very clear blue sky. I saw above my head a hawk, wings extended, with brownish red feathers glistening in the sun. The hawk was circling, soaring, so graceful. It's coming lower, lower, lower. I still looked up. He was maybe about 10 yards above my head. And I looked into his eyes. They were yellow. They were glistening. They were intense. Looking at the water, searching for something, totally focused. I was thinking, this fixed focus of attention on something is being taught to me by a hawk. Gazing and gazing into the water. Suddenly, he's plunged in, head first, right into the river Ganges. went slightly under the water, and I saw a skirmish. It was frantic. This water flush flying in all directions. I was thinking, what's happening down there? Seconds later, the hawk emerged with a fish pierced by its claws. That fish was about 1 foot long and was flapping desperately as the hawk soared higher and higher in the sky, and I was watching. That fish looked so totally bewildered as the hawk took the fish into the forest. I was thinking, what am I supposed to learn from this? A couple things. One is that fish was just going about his or her day. I really don't know the difference with fish, whether they're males or females. But that fish was going, we'll just say his, was going about his day like any other day. Probably swimming around with his friends, his family, going upstream, downstream, looking for food, just enjoying life in the river Ganges. Had no expectation that at the least expected moment, the yellow-eyed hawk of fate would rip him right out of his routine life to suffer and die. And I was thinking how much that relates to our lives. The reality of this world is at any moment, whoever we are, however wealthy, however healthy, however learned, whatever our nationality or our religion or our race or our sex, things could drastically change. We see it on television, we read about it in newspapers, we've seen it among people we know. But our tendency is complacency. We just go on with our routine life, not knowing that the yellow-eyed hawk of fate may have his intense gaze right upon us. So it's important to take life seriously. Now, this is not a concept that should make us paranoid. It should make us serious. Because you see, if that fish was swimming deeper down in the river, the hawk could never touch it. So as long as we are attached to the superficial pleasures, the superficial pains, the superficial dualities, honor, dishonor, praise, infamy, pleasure, pain, happiness, distress, success, failure, victory, defeat, health, disease, birth, death. These dualities are everywhere in this world, and at any moment the dualities can flip over from one to the other. Just like the waves of the river Ganges. When there's a windy day, the waves are really turbulent. When it's a peaceful day, the waves are very mild. But if you go deep down, whether it's windy or peaceful, makes no difference at all. The current, deep down, is steady and remains the same. It's unaffected by the surface. Pains when we're looking for our satisfaction in superficial things that are always changing and unpredictable. And that's the state of our consciousness. But if we actually go deep, then we can be transcendental. We can deal with whatever happens with inner satisfaction, the satisfaction that is within ourselves. The Bhagavad Gita explains that real intelligence is a person who is illumined from within, enlightened within, and finds one's satisfaction within. Because when we think about it, happiness is not about how much money we have in the bank. It's not necessarily about all these physical and mental things. Happiness is a state of heart. If you have a peaceful mind, some satisfaction in the mind, even if your body's causing you some pain, you deal with it, but you're happy because you have a peaceful mind. But if you don't have a peaceful mind, even if your body's perfect, you're miserable. So the subtler the happiness, the more powerful it is in affecting our state of consciousness. And the subtlemost form of happiness, which is the essence of happiness, is to connect to the eternal peace, the eternal love, the eternal bliss of the soul. We have a physical body with these five senses. We have a subtle body of the mind, intelligence, and the ego. But the conscious force, the witness, that's seeing through the eyes, hearing through the ears, tasting through the tongue, feeling through the flesh, thinking through the brain, and loving through the heart. Who is that? Who am I? The Bhagavad Gita explains so comprehensively. Najayate mriyate va kadachit. That we are the eternal living force, the Atma, which has no birth and has no death, which is Satchit Ananda. It is immortal, it is full of knowledge, and most importantly, it is full of bliss. There's an Indian analogy that I learned in the Himalayas. The musk deer. The musk deer has an organ that is so fragrant. I know someone in Bombay who has one of those organs. It's a little furry ball. It's musk in its original state. And he keeps it in a closet. And in the closet he has a drawer. When he opens that closet and opens the drawer, the whole house smells like an intoxicating energy that just is irresistible. It's so fragrant. Can you imagine having that smell inside of yourself? You're living with it 24 hours a day. But the musk deer smells it and wants to have it because it's so good. He wants to have it. He doesn't know it's inside himself. He's looking. His whole life, the musk deer is looking through the forest, behind the trees and the bushes, in other animals, smelling them. Where is it? Where is it? Spends a whole life looking for it, not knowing that it's within himself. We're all looking for pleasure. We're all looking for happiness. But the only real happiness that can satisfy the heart is within ourselves. And what is that happiness? If we understand theoretically and gradually through spiritual practice, we get experience, realization, revelation that we're eternal. And all the different transformations and changes that happen on the surface of life, we deal with it, but it's not really all that important. It can't faze us. I remember my dear godbrother, Bhakti Tirtha Swami, during his last days in this world. He was leaving this world with melanoma cancer, and he asked me to be at his bedside. I was with him for almost 8 weeks. And one day, the pain was so intense, his body was trembling violently. And our routine was, every day for some hours, I would just sit with him and talk about Krishna and our Gurudev, Prabhupada, and so many spiritual subject matters. And we shared our hearts. But on that day, as I was speaking, I could see it was impossible for him to concentrate. The pain was too intense. So I just started to chant. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram, Hare Hare. And although his body was trembling, he was chanting with me. Or perhaps I was chanting with him. And suddenly, he smiled. An oceanic smile. Now, he was African American and his teeth were really white. So this smile really lit up the room. It was an effulgent smile. And his eyes were glistening. He looked like the happiest person I had ever seen. And then he started crying. I never saw him cry in pain. He was crying in joy, uncontrollably, smiling, laughing, and crying in happiness. And then he took my hand and he said, Maharaj, it doesn't get any better than this. His body was still trembling. I said, what do you mean? He said, it just doesn't get any better than this. He said, at this moment, I am tasting Krishna in his name so deeply within my heart, and it's giving me so much pleasure. I know where I'm going. He said, I would not change the condition I'm in with anyone else in the world. And he said it with as much certainty as any human being could ever speak. Yes, he was dealing with his bodily situation, but he was accessing what's within all of us, the ecstasy of our love for God. Lord Chaitanya prayed, Nitya Siddha Krishna Prema Sajja Kabunoi Saravanadi Sudhichiti Koriye Yudoi. That this ecstatic love for Krishna, for the all-attractive Lord, is within the heart of every living being. It's our nature. By chanting God's names, by living a spiritually oriented life and harmonizing our spiritual principles with whatever we do in this world, that love is awakened. And when we have this understanding, and the stress that comes upon us helps us to go deeper instead of being frustrated by what's happening externally. Bhakti is the art of transforming stress into a positive energy. It brings us joy and makes us grow. How does that work? We see among athletes that stress helps them to grow. A weightlifter, the heavier the weights, if he manages the stress properly, he gets stronger. If he puts too much and he doesn't know how to manage it, he'll dislocate his limbs and get hernias and everything like that. But if he doesn't put enough weight, he doesn't make any progress. Or a runner is running and running and running, and by that exhaustion of the pumping of the lungs, he's gaining greater stamina. And a student. Tests, exams are stressful. Yes? Why do teachers give us these exams? Because that stress, if we're serious, it will help us to just focus on the studies and try to assimilate it with more attention. If we don't manage that stress properly, we can become discouraged. Some students commit suicide because of the stress. Not transformed. And in spiritual life, the challenges, the reversals that come are the perfect remedy to increase our devotion, our love, and our internal joy, if we just know the art and see the opportunity of how to transform it into something spiritually positive. Like these flowers. Flowers love when there's storms because they grow. They may not love getting beaten up by the rain, but they grow into something beautiful. And that's how our life becomes beautiful. By learning the art of going deeper. And that's what yoga means. Yoga means to reconnect with our own spiritual essence. And even relationships. Stress in relationships could break them or bring them to a higher platform. We kind of have to make that choice. Can I tell you another personal story? Just about the same time as the Edsels. And I used to hear my father singing about April showers and the flowers that bloom in May. That was his hope, that this will somehow or other bring about something. He had hope in a hopeless condition. And sure enough, he went into another business after that. He sold a Studebaker lark. And he went out of business again. Twice in a row. And then he borrowed more money and started another business, which was the Toyo Pet, which he thought this is going to be something big someday, but nobody bought it. And he went out of business again, and the Toyo Pet company, after he went out of business and lost everything, it became Toyota. And he missed everything. he left it behind, and a couple of years later it became Toyota Motors. But he was still singing the same song in the shower. And later on he just started doing something else, and he became quite wealthy. He just had hope and never gave up. He made most of his wealth after I went to India. But about the time of the Edsels, I was maybe about 10 or 12, and my mother said to me, everyone loves your father, and everyone loves me, but we don't love each other anymore. We have decided to separate. I think I was about 10. And I was sitting on my mother's bed. She was putting on her eyelash stuff. I don't remember what it's called. And she told me that while she was doing this. And I started to cry. Little boy like that, it was like the whole world was falling out from underneath me. It was so inconceivable and so traumatic. I just cried but couldn't say a word. And she looked at me and she couldn't say a word. Then I ran out of the room. My father came home. And he went into the room of my parents. And they closed the door. And I put my ear to the door from outside, secretly. And I heard my mother tell my father what happened to me. And I heard both of them totally silent, and then they said, somehow or other, for the sake of our children, we're going to work it out. And a few years later, it was one of the most beautiful, affectionate relationships I've ever seen. It took a few years. Because when we base our relationships, when we base our life on a higher principle, then all these lower things are harmonized by that higher principle. What is the higher principle of life? In this case, the higher principle that what they felt about each other was their children, and by working toward that, when my mother passed away, they had just celebrated their 58th wedding anniversary. And they were totally loyal and faithful and affectionate to each other. Completely. There was just nothing but trust. But they had to earn that. And if we apply a spiritual principle, how much deeper our relations are. We have our worldly duties, our family duties, but we also have our connection on the higher principle of loving service to the Lord. My beloved Guru Maharaj, Srila Prabhupada, in the last days of his life in this material world, he really challenged us with a very simple instruction that we didn't think was such a challenge until we had to follow it. He said, you will show your love for me by how you cooperate with one another. Now there can be hundreds and thousands of reasons not to cooperate. There's hundreds and thousands of reasons not to be happy in any situation. Yes? So many things could happen. But if we, like that hawk, he was focused on a fish and he got that fish. If we focus on the higher principle, then we will realize the immortality of our souls. And we will realize that same immortality within each other. One of my very, very favorite verses of Bhagavad Gita speaks about going deep and searching for the essence. In Sanskrit, Saragrahi means one who's always seeking the essence of every situation that comes upon us, seeking the essence of every person, of everything. These physical things could be changed. And through the beautiful grace of time everything changes. The baby becomes an old widow. And the beautiful body becomes ashes. Everything's changing in this world. But the life force within all of us never changes. And if we learn to communicate with each other, communicate with nature, and communicate with our own occupational duties according to this higher principle, then everything in life is harmonized on the basis of love, on the basis of compassion. This is the greatest need in the world. And any other solution is only symptomatic. The Gulf of Mexico, the British Petroleum Company made that hole in the ground, and all this oil started coming. That was a good thing for them. See how the Hawk of Destiny, that yellow hawk, that yellow-eyed hawk, really had his eyes on British Petroleum Company. He's watching as they're digging, and they got this really good oil well that's going to probably bring them millions and millions of dollars in profits. But then something goes wrong, and it explodes, and people are dead, and water's and oil's gushing through that hole, and they're spending probably billions of dollars trying to fix it. And it's creating a disaster. What is the solution? Put a cap on it. We have to deal with the problems of life on the external level, but that's not where the solution could ever come. The problem is there's a hole of ignorance in the heart. And that hole of ignorance, the toxic oil of greed and arrogance is gushing. And that is what is impelling us to exploit our environment, take Mother Nature's beautiful, wonderful gifts, and replenish her with poisonous, toxic waste. Mahatma Gandhi, he said, Mother Earth can supply everything for everyone with no problem. But Mother Earth cannot supply enough even for a few people who are plagued with greed. Another great person, he said that you can never get enough of what we don't really want. And that's the problem. All this stuff, all this money, all this physical pleasure, all this power, all this prestige, all this control that people are so greedy for, all this arrogance that the people are trying to build themselves up, we can never get enough of it because it's not what we really want. Krishna says it's like putting fuel in a fire. It just gets bigger and bigger the more you give it. What do we really want? We want pleasure. And the only pleasure that satisfies the heart is the pleasure of love. If you don't have that, you can't be happy in any situation. And the origin of that need to be loved is the eternal principle of the soul's love for God. And in that love, the soul's love for everything connected to God. Om Purnam Ada Purnamidam. Everything in this world is potentially sacred if we see it in harmony with this compassion that's within us. Yes, you can cap that thing in the ocean. But if we don't cap that gaping hole of ignorance in our hearts, there's going to be another oil leak, and another one, and another one. And Prahlad Maharaj explained in the Bhagavatam that the nature of this world is without this type of spiritual wisdom of cleansing the ecology of our hearts, finding inner satisfaction, where we don't need things. Real happiness is in expressing and sharing that love within us with others, with everyone, unconditional. Ahoitaki apratihata. Loving service that is unmotivated and uninterrupted by any egoistic conceptions, any selfishness, is the only thing that can satisfy the heart. Without that, was Krishna, who appeared in this age just 500 years ago. He wanted to teach us that the most beautiful expression of spirituality is to serve. So although he was Bhagavan, he was God, he presented himself as a servant of everyone. But one day, with his most intimate, loving associates, because they so much wanted to honor him as the Lord, just for their pleasure, he sat on the altar in the house of Srivas. And he started singing the Abhishek song, which means a song where the Lord is bathed. If you come on Janmashtami, you will see this. And all these great saints were there. Avatars, saints, incarnations, they had all gathered for the purpose of offering this water. And way in the background, there was a little maidservant. Nobody ever heard of her. Her name was Duki. Duki means the miserable one. Now in India, sometimes if a person's really poor and they're coming from a really destitute type of family, the family wants sympathy for the child because they know there's kind of no way out. You know, we're poor, we're suffering, now we have this daughter, and she's going to be poor, and she's going to be suffering. So they call her Duki. This is a tradition, actually. You call her the miserable one, so fate will feel sorry for her. And maybe be lenient on her. So Duki was a maidservant of a maidservant of Srivas. And she didn't want anything for herself. She just wanted to help. She was going to the Ganges River and filling the little clay pots with the water, and then coming and putting it in very nice, neat rows. And then somebody would just see the water there, didn't even bother to think who put it there. Who cares? Then give it to someone else. And then that person would give it to someone else, and they would give it to one of the great, great saints, and they would pour the water on the Lord, offer it to the Lord. And she was running back and forth with pots of water. You know, they'd take it after it was empty, and they just kind of throw it aside, and she'd pick it up and run to the Ganges and put in nice rows, nice rows. And Lord Chaitanya was looking at her only. He said to Srivas, "Who is this? Who is this?" And Srivas said, "She's a maidservant. Her name is Duki, the miserable one." And Lord Chaitanya, he saw her heart. She was probably illiterate. She didn't have any fame. She didn't have any followers. She had nothing except a sincere and earnest desire to serve, to please God. Srila Prabhupada wrote, Krishna does not see everything that's offered. Krishna sees the intent, the purpose in which everything is offered. And Duki, she didn't even care if anyone noticed her. In fact, nobody ever did. She just wanted to assist those who were pleasing the Lord. And the Lord, when he was told she was Duki, he said, this name does not sit comfortably in my heart. From this day, I give her the name Sukhi, which means the happy one. But he not only gave her the name, he gave her the eternal ultimate perfection. He gave her the highest state of samadhi, of prema, pure love. What yogis may spend lifetimes in the Himalayan caves trying to get, what scholars may spend lifetimes scrutinizing and memorizing scriptures to get, what other people may spend lifetimes giving everything they have in donations to others and to God. She got it in a second. Because she was sincere. The Lord comes to this world to give that gift to everyone, to anyone. Whether business people or housewives or students or doctors or lawyers or farmers or politicians or even swamis, whatever we may be. If we just perform our work as an expression of that depth that we're seeking in our heart, by harmonizing it in the service of God, we can become Sukhi. We can become happy forever. And the waves of the inevitable, we're all going to grow old and get disease and die. If we live that long, we should all try. This body is a sacred temple that can have great use for the whole world. But still, material nature is what it is. We should do everything the best we possibly can with these gifts, these divine gifts of a human body, as an expression of what is within us. Not that we use these bodies to try to get, and get more, to possess and enjoy. It's frustrating. But these bodies are meant to be utilized as instruments to express the love within ourselves, the compassion within ourselves. This chanting of the holy names of the Lord is meant to access that potency. To be an instrument to share it with the world. Thank you very much. Do we have time for one or two questions? How do you deal with that? Because it's there. It's not that we can just pretend things are not there. It's really there. It's a reality. Krishna tells us in a beautiful verse, Tani saravani samyanya yukta asiti makara sehi asyindrini tasya pragya pratishtita. Which means in essence that when we're in the face of these anarthas or these unwanted things that are either coming from within or coming from without, We have to do two things simultaneously. One, with our intelligence, understand it for what it is. If something is there that's extremely harmful, and we believe it's actually something very good, which is the way most people are in this world. When greed comes, instead of thinking, this greed is separating me from my own spiritual essence. It's insatiable. So we try to deal with it in a proper way. But most people, that greed is their best friend. And they'll give their lives to satisfy its dictations. Yes? Hatred. We hate people. There's one beautiful saying that when you hate someone and you try to hurt them, it's like drinking poison thinking it's going to kill the other person. Because keeping that hate in your heart is killing yourself, killing your character, killing your virtues, and killing your spirituality. Vengeance, trying to get vengeance on someone is like picking up a red-hot coal to throw it at the person. You're the one that gets burnt. That person may get a little burnt too. It's burning away your qualities, your character. So we have to see things for what it is. This is what knowledge is for. I don't want to follow these dictations that are coming from within me. There's a beautiful analogy that in every heart there's a good dog and a bad dog. How many of you have heard this before? Please be tolerant. I'll say it again. Bhagavad Gita tells that there's a divine nature and a demoniac nature within all of us in this conditioned state. Or a good dog and a bad dog. The bad dog represents our lust and our envy and our greed and our arrogance, selfishness, our anger, our illusion. And those qualities within us are oftentimes barking really, really loud and howling and demanding. And then there's the good dog. Humility, forgiveness, self-control, compassion. These two dogs are fighting within us. Which one is stronger? Which one's going to win? The one that we choose to feed at every moment. At every moment, we respond to situations that come to us, and we have a choice to respond to this situation by feeding our good dog or feeding our bad dog. Many people just keep feeding that bad dog, and it is howling. And the good dog. So what do we do about that? We have to stop feeding the bad dog and keep feeding the good dog. Positive alternative. And we all have the power to make those choices. Character means to live according to sacred ideals, even when it's very difficult. Integrity is when we uphold our ideals, even in the face of temptation or fear. That's what gives substance of character. Making these choices. And I heard a nice quote from Vajrayana Prabhu today. Sangam, Seva, and Sadhana. 3 things. By associating with holy people, instead of exploiting, by choosing to serve, and by doing our spiritual practices to get spiritual strength in order to do it. And we can gradually transform all that anger and frustration and greed into something beautiful. And everyone has the power and the right to do it. We just have to make that choice. And if we make that choice that I want to feed the good dog, my divine nature, then we'll associate with people who help us, inspire us to do that. Rupa Goswami says, accepts what's favorable to the growth of our spiritual life and reject what's unfavorable. And the fact that you're asking this question means you're serious. And if you just if we just try sincerely, however weak we may be, that sincerity will attract the all-powerful potency of God to help us. And we express that sincerity by sincerely trying to do our spiritual practices, by sincerely trying to associate with those people that will uplift us, and by choosing to serve rather than exploit. Just do those things. And Krishna will be with you, to empower you, to uplift you, to liberate you. Does that answer your question? So don't worry about those things there. Just deal with them. Don't ever become depressed, despondent. Don't ever give up. Krishna's always there. No matter how many times you trip and fall, if you just honestly and sincerely take shelter, everything comes. And knowing our shortcomings can actually help to humble us so that we really do take shelter. Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, and Prabhupada quotes him in one purport. He says, a person can chant God's names birth after birth after birth and not attain perfection until one chants according to the sacred principle of Trinada Visunicina, Tumor Ivasi Yeshu, Amanina, Manina, Kirtanesa. To be humble like the grass, tolerant like a tree, eager to offer all respect to others and not expect a return. These same situations that you're talking about, if we process it properly, can help to humble us and take shelter. So just keep feeding that good dog. And Krishna will be there. This is the conclusion of Bhagavad Gita. We just turn to Krishna in the spirit. Victory is for certain. Thank you very, very much. Thank you.